Guess what me and Andrew found?
Where have you been, young lady? You're late.
Huh?
I asked you where you've been.
Well, I was trying to tell you, me and Andrew.
Fact is, you're late.
Whether you were an avid follower of Little House on the Prairie program during its original run or discovered the charm of Laura Ingalls and her family through reruns, the idyllic portrayal of pioneer life may not be as saintly captured behind the scenes. While the show captured the essence of 19th century settler life, there were darker realities lurking off camera. What were some of the shocking scandals in the show? And how did the off-screen experiences contrast with the heartwarming narratives in the show? Join us as we delve into how this scene wasn't edited. Look again at the Little House on the Prairie, pushing Melissa's buttons. Even though Laura Ingalls and Nellie Oleson were depicted as being each other's archenemies on the show, the two actors were in fact the best of friends off set. At a later point in the series, Nellie and Percival got married, despite the fact that Steve Tracy, the actor who played Percival, was actually gay. Nellie and Percival's controversial relationship didn't matter much in the show, as often as the two characters could. In a clear attempt at aggravating Melissa Gilbert, they'd passionately make out in front of her. Laura and her love interest Almanzo's love life wasn't nearly as spicy as Nellie's and Percival's, who went out of their way to make their on-screen displays of affection as in her face as possible. Of course, Gilbert, being the youthful and innocent actress she was absolutely agonized by their emotionally insensitive cruelty, booze, and harmful substance. You might be appalled to find out many of the cast and crew members of Little House on the Prairie had some fairly disturbing addictions. Most of these vices involved chemical dependency on booze and harmful substance. As such, it wasn't uncommon to find both on set. Reportedly, the crew polished off 230 racks of cores every day. Some especially stressful days were even dubbed three-case days. According to Melissa Gilbert's memoir, Michael Landon was one of the heaviest drinkers on set. He would start off his day with a coffee spiked with liquor and would keep the drinks flowing throughout the rest of the day. Most folks on set had no clue how much he was drinking. He kept it under wraps. But eventually, the full extent of his alcoholism became evident. Michael Landon's true identity. Michael Landon was actually Jewish, even though his character on the show was often seen pushing a Christian message. In real life, he was Jewish. Michael Landon was actually just a stage name. He was born as Eugene Maurice Orowitz. Despite having to play a Christian on screen, Landon didn't find that in conflict with his cultural identity or beliefs. He grew up in New York and New Jersey. His father, Eli Maurice Orowitz, was Jewish, although his mother, Peggy O'Neill, was a practicing Catholic. He was later quoted as saying he took after his father's cultural identity but didn't personally subscribe to any particular religious beliefs. He was a believer in God but only identified as Jewish in the cultural sense. Landon's dyed hair. Landon's curls were something to marvel at, but if you assumed his lush brunette mane was all natural, you're mistaken. His signature look came from a bottle. His actual hair color was a muted ashy brown. He took his hair color very seriously. He routinely went to a professional stylist to get the dye job done right. Even so, when he started to get some grays, the set lights and natural sunlight would make his dye take on a peculiar purplish hue. Producers would have to call an extra help from professional colorists to fix the issue. Serious issues addressed in the show. In general, Little House on the Prairie took on a pretty lighthearted tone, but from time to time, it actually dealt with some pretty risque themes. This was an era where TV was beginning to push the boundaries of what was considered socially and politically acceptable. Sexual assault, drug addiction, racism, prejudice, adoption, and disabilities became frequent topics of consideration for the trailblazing series. Very few programs at the time were willing to touch on these subjects. So, in a way, Little House on the Prairie was ahead of its time. Family matters in the show. On the show, Willie Oleson, played by Jonathan Gilbert, was the younger brother of Nellie. In real life, he was actually the adopted sibling of Melissa Gilbert. Sadly, the two actors are no longer in good standing with each other. They had a falling out after Little House wrapped up. Jonathan went on to get his MBA in finance and is currently working as a stockbroker in New York. Melissa continued working as an actress. She also served as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2001 to 2005. In 2016, she ran a campaign for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives for Michigan's 8th Congressional District. Even though she was the presumptive Democratic nominee for her district, she was forced to drop out of the race because of injuries sustained in a 2012 accident. Mary and Laura's relationship. Mary and Laura Ingalls weren't fond of each other. When Melissa Anderson and Melissa Gilbert were still young actresses, they couldn't stand each other. The divide between the two became so fiery that no one else on set even wanted to deal with them. Their feud continued for the whole duration of the series. Can you picture working alongside someone for years on end that you absolutely despise? Well, some people don't have to struggle to imagine such a scenario, as you can probably think of a coworker or two that rubs you the wrong way. But these two young girls not only had trouble getting along, but they were constantly fighting and bickering with each other for 9 years. Good grief, Walnut Grove is a real place. The Ingalls family lived on a small farm near the village of Walnut Grove. Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote the original semi-autobiographical book series that the show was based on, had lived in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, for several years of her childhood. Although much of her books were based on other locales that were also significant to her story, the real Walnut Grove was founded in 1874 and incorporated in 1879 and is in Redwood County, Minnesota. The town's fairly tiny, with a population of only 8,006 as of 2019 and a land area of 1 square mile. On-set romances. Little House on the Prairie is one of those rare shows that could never be recreated. The chemistry with its cast was impeccable. The poignant timing of its thematic elements seemed to hit audiences at just the right time, and its setting in rural America left viewers longing for simpler times. It's rumored that a remake film could be in the works, but production seems to have gone cold in the last couple of years. And maybe that's for the best. The Little House series was written by Laura Ingalls Wilder, who intended it as a historical drama to represent her childhood in the Midwest. She lived there between 1870 and 1894 when she was a child. The United States bought much of the Midwest from France in 1803 in an event known as the Louisiana Purchase. However, much of that land was uncharted by Americans and remained unsettled for some time. The practice of homesteading became popular when families moved into the great unknown and built homes on the land. Homesteaders focused entirely on self-sufficiency and built their own homes, grew their own food, and sometimes even produced their own clothes. While the U.S. government romanticized this lifestyle to encourage citizens to begin settling the Midwest, it was a difficult way of living. Laura Ingalls Wilder and her family settled in Kansas when she was just 3 years old, and they faced many hardships. However, Laura learned many things growing up, and it inspired her to write a book series later on in life. The book series was immensely popular across America. It was so popular that a man named Ed Friendly was inspired to create a television series based on the books. After he gained the rights to the books, he wasted no time in producing the series. Little House on the Prairie aired on September 11, 1974, and concluded after 8 seasons on March 10, 1982. A slightly different version of the series called Little House, New Beginnings, ran the following year. The series was a family favorite in households across America because people loved learning what life was like during the age of pioneers. Even today, children and adults alike love the series. Much of the show's success is owed to the talented cast members. Melissa Gilbert and Michael Landon had a turbulent friendship. Melissa Gilbert played the star of the series, Laura Ingalls, while Michael Landon played Pa Ingalls. When Melissa was only 11 years old, her adopted father ended his life. Although she was told at the time he had suffered a stroke, as a result, Melissa felt she was lacking a father figure. Once she was cast to play Laura Ingalls, however, she found she greatly looked up to Michael Landon. The two grew incredibly close, and Michael Landon even told her he loved her like a father. They engaged in all sorts of antics while the camera crew wasn't filming. However, their relationship took a turn for the worse. Michael divorced his wife to pursue a romantic interest on set, a makeup artist by the name of Cindy Clerico. Melissa, whose parents had divorced when she was only 8, felt betrayed by Michael's decision. She became so angry with him, she cut off all forms of contact. While the two lost their close relationship for some time, Melissa eventually decided it was time to let bygones be bygones. When Michael was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Melissa made up with him. After his death, she even named one of her children Michael in memory of him. Two rivals on the show were best friends in real life. While Melissa Gilbert played the character Laura, a member of the Ingalls family, actor Allison Arngrim played Nellie, who was a member of the Olsen family in the show. The Ingalls and the Olsens did not get along at all. Laura and Nellie, especially, had an intense rivalry. However, while both actors were great at portraying animosity between each other for the camera, they were best friends in real life. The two spent lots of time together when they weren't busy working, and they got up to all sorts of crazy shenanigans. They were so close they even had sleepovers at each other's houses. Amazingly, the two young actors who were such close friends were able to act so horribly to each other on screen. They may have been young, but their performances remain a true testament to their talent. Melissa Gilbert had a hard time portraying romance. Even today, young actresses are often cast in romantic roles alongside significantly older men, but this issue was even more prevalent during the production of Little House on the Prairie. This created a particularly uncomfortable situation for Melissa Gilbert, who was just 15 when she had to film her first on-screen kiss, also her first real-life kiss. In the series, Melissa's character, Laura, marries Almanzo Wilder, played by 23-year-old Dean Butler. The age gap made the experience nerve-wracking for Melissa, who felt uneasy about kissing someone so much older. Unsure of how to handle the situation, she turned to Michael Landon, a close friend and father figure, who also served as a director on the show. Understanding her discomfort, Landon took her concerns seriously and brought the issue to the producers. Fortunately, they were receptive to Melissa's feelings and decided to adjust the scene, replacing the kiss with a simple peck on the cheek. Other cast members made fun of Melissa's innocence. It was no secret Melissa had difficulty portraying her on-screen romance with Dean Butler. While most of the cast members respected this fact, so as not to embarrass her, a couple of Melissa's friends and fellow actors thought it was a great way to tease her. Allison Arngrim, who was one of Melissa's best friends, played the character Nellie, who later married another character named Percival. Percival was played by actor Steve Tracy, who was also good friends with Allison. The two decided to play up their romance both on screen and behind the scenes, just to annoy poor Melissa. They engaged in joking, heated make-out sessions to make her uncomfortable. Of course, it was all in good fun, although Melissa likely felt quite embarrassed, while Steve Tracy and Allison Arngrim had no trouble pretending to be madly in love. The real-life situation could not be further from the truth. While they were great friends, Steve Tracy was gay, and any chance of an on-set romance with Allison was out of the question. Not everyone was friends on set. While Melissa Gilbert and Allison Arngrim were best friends behind the scenes, not everyone could be expected to get along so well. While all the actors were able to put aside their differences for the sake of the show, there were still some tensions when the cameras weren't rolling. Melissa Sue Anderson played Mary Ingalls, the older sister of Melissa Gilbert's Laura. While the two appeared quite close in the show, they didn't get along at all behind the scenes. While nobody knows the exact reason for the feud, whatever differences the two actors had ran deep. Even years after the show ended, neither actor was willing to extend a hand in the name of friendship. Melissa Gilbert explained her dislike towards Melissa Sue Anderson in Prairie Tale, where she explained that she was cold and bratty. However, we never got Melissa Sue Anderson's side of the story, so the real reason behind the feud may forever remain a mystery. While Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson had the most pronounced dislike towards each other, Melissa Gilbert wasn't alone in her feelings. Other cast members reportedly announced that Melissa Sue Anderson was icy towards them. However, some have speculated that due to Melissa Sue Anderson's protective mother and sheltered upbringing, she may not have learned how to behave in a friendly manner towards others. The cast members loved to joke around. Despite a few differences, most of the cast members had a great time together. Michael Landon was known for his practical jokes. Melissa Gilbert and Allison Arngrim learned a few tricks from Michael Landon. In one incident, they pranked their fellow actors by putting saran wrap over one of the toilets.